Hello everyone, welcome to the Woodland Walk for July. We have Cassie Thornton here today as our guest. And I'll just say a little bit about Cassie and why we've invited her, and then over to Cassie. I am so excited about this Woodland Walk. Cassie Thornton is the author of a book, The Hologram, which you can see my scruffily written copy. But Cassie has also the updated version too to show you. But this book, it was a gift from a friend, and it has been one of the most genuinely life-changing books, inspiring books. This book is about a feminist peer-to-peer health for a post-pandemic future, and it's about creating networks of care. And I'll let Cassie explain more about it, but this is a book that does something. This is a book that is so beautiful, is so creative, but it really gives us the invitation and the means and the practicalities to actually create networks of care where we are right now. And so we decided to talk about the hologram for the month of July, the oak tree, because we focus in ASA on accepting all the parts of ourselves. We think of ourselves like an oak tree ecosystem with the snarling boar and the little bluebird and the creepy crawlies and all the other insects that live there, the parts of ourselves that are challenging, that are unhappy, that are exiled, that are angry, but also joyful and easier to accept, and the whole range. And the wonderful thing about the hologram is that it's not just, and this all probably sounds very obscure because you don't know what it is yet, but Cassie will explain. But the wonderful thing about the hologram is that it's it's not just a kind of viral social technology, although I don't know if you like the word social technology, Cassie, but it's a kind of viral social technology for really bringing about quite extraordinary change, cultural change, in a way that, in terms of like something that could actually change the way we live and the way the world is. This is one of the things that's given me the most excitement and hope. But it's also extremely personal. It's not just a collective tool. This is something that we can bring into our lives, our personal lives, in a way that's so flexible, that can just bring care, support, clarity, and it's all for free. There's no money changing hands. So we're thinking about bringing this into the ASA community, but we also, it can be used in all sorts of different ways. So Cassie, thank you for your work. And that was a very long introduction. But it would be great if you could just tell us a little bit about how, maybe whichever one you want to do first, like what is the hologram and how you came to create it.
Oh, thank you. Um, it's really nice to be here. I love sort of watching, we were just saying, there's all of these kind of really new kinds of communities popping up. And I think it's not a coincidence that the world is it's like such a difficult place right now and has been, but that our response is to build like networks and new communities is so cool. So thanks for having me. Um, yeah, so I mean, I think I grew up in the US. I feel like that's really important. And I I kind of heard a rumor because I was an anti-debt activist living in the US um, and lived there up until 2017. And I guess I just felt like, wow, we have a real crisis in the healthcare system in that no one I know has health access to healthcare, but we're not talking about it. This is during Obama. And I was looking at debt as many people in my family kind of like died because of not having access to care because they didn't want to take on medical debt or because they had too much. And in the US and like now most places in the world have some relationship to personal debt, but in order to have housing or healthcare education, we had to go into debt my whole life. And so I did a lot of work to try to understand, like, was that our fault or was that like a systemic thing? And clearly it's a systemic thing. But I had my eyes open to kind of what was happening in terms of people's relationship to debt around the world. And so I think this is like the kind of the basis of where the hologram comes from is that I wanted to do something that was different than what I had been living with, which is that like whatever you received was scary because you knew that whatever you received was going to have like a price tag that you'd probably never be able to pay off. And so like in order to get better, you got worse. And I just really wanted it to have a different experience than that. And then I was watching what was happening in Greece, because they had a financial crisis around 2008, the same time many of us around the world did. Um, and they also had open borders, so a lot of migrants were moving to Greece to escape war. And um, so there was this moment when I found out that they were organizing free clinics with completely free care in response to austerity and lots of people needing help. And this blew my mind because I was like, like it just seems impossible. But doctors and therapists and dentists and masseuses were all volunteering in these buildings that were sometimes like squats and sometimes in churches or whatever, but there were like 60 clinics at one point. And I just couldn't believe that that was a response to austerity. And then I found out that there was one clinic in particular that was like not, they didn't want to just give free care, but they wanted to give better care. And so they were looking at how to kind of ruin some of the hierarchies in medicine. And the one that I think is the important one is like how there's just a sense that's like, as a person receiving care, you have no power to say, like, what's wrong, what's working for you, what's not working for you. It's like you go in and you're handed to an expert, and that expert determines everything for you. And I was just so moved by the idea that somebody was trying to deal with that. And so, one of the experiments that they were doing at the Social Solidarity Clinic of Thessaloniki was like, when you would go in, you were called an incomer. So you weren't a patient, and we took away kind of like all of the sense that like in order to need care, like you're broken or invalid or anything like that. And then you're seen, the incomer is seen by a social worker who is also maybe at times just a volunteer, a therapist, and a doctor. And those three people would just like meet with the person and ask them questions. And then the incomer at the end would say what they heard and what they wanted in terms of care. And then the doctors, the three people would help support them to get that care without money. And they could do that because they were part of a giant network of people that were like working in solidarity. And some of those people were working in hospitals. Some of those people had started anarchist pharmacies with slightly expired pharmaceuticals. So really, they could get people what they needed. And it just changed my life to hear about that and to think about like, having three people's attention on you like that. And these meetings would go on as long as they needed to happen. It wasn't like 15 minutes, it was like 2 hours. And so then my question was like, how do we do it? And I had a friend that was a community acupuncturist who'd really like latched onto the history of community acupuncture as it relates to like the Black Panthers and the Young Lords and really like doing it yourself, but also doing it in groups and like collective healing, um, and healing from trauma that comes from real harms from the state and from yeah, from actually from pharmaceutical companies themselves and things like that. So um, the hologram was an attempt to do what they were doing in Thessaloniki among friends. And so that's what it is like now when the person that receives care is called the hologram. The hologram invites three people to meet with them regularly, and those three people ask them questions. And so one person asks social questions, and one person asks physical questions, and one person asks mental and emotional questions. And they just do that regularly. So I've been doing it for 5 years, and I have the same three people in the same structure. And we meet about every season. And then my job is to make sure that each of those three people have support as well, but not from me. So I ask them, like, would you like a hologram or would you like some other kind of support? Because a big part of the hologram is just making sure that all the people that give care are cared for. Because I think that's kind of like the thing we've overlooked, I don't know, in modernity. Um, So the hologram is that. It's a viral peer-to-peer care project. There's a really like structured protocol for how to have a meeting. It's very formal. Everything about it is very formal because the context is informal, because the context is at your kitchen table or on your couch or online in your bed. And then that structure is something that we can do with our friends or people that we know. Um, and yeah, and it's like it's a practice now. And I think like it started, I'm an artist and it started as an art project. And then in the pandemic, it became something that we started to teach online, became quite popular. And then I wrote this book about it. and became more popular. And now it's really just like something it's organized by a group of probably like 20 people from around the world. And it's just something that, yeah, anyone can kind of have and take and use. Is that a
Mhm.
good start?
Thank you, Cassie. Yeah, I love it, and it's so lovely to hear you speak and to be having this conversation with you because as I've read this book, I mean, it's just just underlined almost every line, it just and to actually hear you talk about the story and hear about it is yeah, it's an amazing experience for me. And I think I would really encourage people to get this book and really read it through and maybe just like I'm just going to show this little picture because this really I think sometimes visual images so it's like oh I've got the weird like blurry thing on. Don't know if people can see that. Okay, you've got like a circle in the middle and you've got like background filtering on so you can't really see it. You can kind of see the vague structure of like the circle in the middle and then the three spokes. So you've got the hologram in the middle, and then you've got your social person, social care, physical care, mental, emotional care. And then what I really love underneath it in this image is it says, the hologram is a teacher. Triangle members are living medical records, not experts or advisors. And I love the way that the way you talk about it is that the way the hologram teaches the three kind of like listeners or the triangle, these three people, um, is by helping them to become better at offering useful questions. And so I think that is just so beautiful because so often, and like, and you talked about the whole, the disempowerment of the patient in kind of doctor-patient relationships, and ASA is a peer supports community, and the thing that we love is that idea that many people in the community are therapists, some are not, but we're all just there with this kind of reciprocity of humanity, and having come from experiences where we felt many of us where we wanted listening and good questions, like really interested questions, rather than people telling us what to do. Um, or even therapy sometimes can be so kind of directive that I love that idea that the hologram is not the kind of like person with the problem because everybody in there is part of their own hologram. So we're all both giving and receiving support, but in different ways.
Mhm.
The beautiful thing about that, from when I was reading this, is that you can be at the heart of your own hologram and have those when you describe that feeling of those three medical people in Greece and Thessaloniki all listening to the person, because when you're going through like a really big thing, having three people to really listen and hear you and care and do a bit of research afterwards. Like I think in the hologram there's an element of someone's going to google some stuff for you and like do a bit of the heavy lifting that when you're really overwhelmed by a big thing you just don't have time. That to me felt so beautiful and so just incredibly powerful. So yeah, I am just really yeah, I think the whole model is really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
And it does also resonate a little bit with psychedelic therapy. And you said earlier when we were chatting that there's something about it that's a little bit psychedelic. And I wonder whether one of the, and I'd love to hear from you about this, but just that point about, you know, people being there just for you in a psychedelic therapy session, um, you're there, you're having your experience, and you've got these guides there with you for like 6 hours or 8 hours, just silently, just there to support you. And there's something about that, like so much care for one person that feels really incredibly moving for people because they're used to not having that. So that's one way that I can almost see that almost after a psychedelic experience, having your hologram there for you, you've had this experience of deep care of these two people, or maybe one person, but someone giving you all their care and attention for a whole day. And then you go back to normal life, and it's kind of like it's harder to get that level of care and attention. And in our community, we have, our peer support circles. But it just struck me that the hologram structure could be so beautifully brought in as an extra level of support, and particularly because it's so flexible, like you said, you could just meet once a season, um that it could just be that extra level of like just really um like accurate empathy, like listening to what you really need.
Yeah. I mean, I think it can be whatever you want it to be. I mean, I think people use the hologram like for all kinds of different forms of like going through a portal. And some of that is like about processing experiences. Some of it is a lot of what's happening right now is like people are trying to deal a little bit with like the kind of meta crises that are around us. And um and then I think there's also people that are trying to birth things. So there's like, you want to write a book and you don't know how to start, or um yeah, but I think it's like everything is very overwhelming. And then you add something like like a psychedelic experience or something else that kind of like brings you to a new space. There's no amount of attention that feels like enough, I think, for anybody anywhere in the world, really. But I think like, yeah, if you're wanting to experiment and like expand your consciousness, I don't know. It's like it's so funny because it's like it feels like the world has accelerated so much that it's really hard to make space for this kind of attention. But I think that's what's psychedelic about the hologram itself is that like it's a very specific, condensed, formal space for very like laser sharp attention. And I think there's something really amazing about the physics of like three people's attention. Like I do think it does something very special. And I don't know if it's this, it might not be the same with four or two people, but like three humans pointing their like all of their energy at somebody, something comes out that's like quite special. And and then I think like a lot of times I imagine that when people are doing like sort of different forms of therapeutic psychedelic work, or like just I think like even just really trying to work through genuine like human stuff, we're often just trying to get outside of a sort of narrative that we're stuck in. And
Mm.
I think the other part about the hologram that's really cool is that you're asking like laterally. So you might get a question about like your ankle if you have maybe you broke your ankle, but then you might also be talking about like Achilles, like the myth. And then you might also talk about your mom. And I think that there's a way of asking questions because we're doing things like in a long-term way in the hologram, like you can explore laterally without kind of like zoning in and trying to fix anything. And so like you learn things about yourselves and you begin to tell stories in a way that you might not otherwise tell. And I think that's really interesting because you can kind of like maybe just get yourself a new story about what you're living through. Um, and the other thing that I think is really important to say is that like um, as a person like in the triangle asking questions, like, I think you're actually learning more about yourself, or you're learning as much about yourself as you are about the hologram. Because it's like all of our stuff is so bound up together. And like when you get underneath the cover story and get to like the real sort of shared fears and wishes and desires, like it's pretty consistent. And so like actually getting to hear about somebody else's journey in pursuit of or away from stuff, like more often than not, it's just like it's very, very familiar and very useful. So it's like it's a real two-way benefit or
Yeah.
four-way benefit. Like it's a humongous pleasure to be in someone's hologram. And I think it's important to say both because it's hard to ask for help
Mm.
and there's something about the moment that feels particularly overwhelming. So like dedicating time to something like this might feel scary, but I would say that it's like it gives way more energy than it takes even if you're in the role that seems like you're being like in a more generous role.
Mm. Yes. Um, and I love the fact that there's this idea that you also get, you're one of the listeners, one of the triangle, but then you find your own hologram, you find your own people to listen to you and be there for you. But that in terms of the timings of it, it's so flexible. So you might be a listener, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like from what I've read, and I know that there's an updated book coming out soon, so we'll have to talk about that in a sec, but that you can say somebody you were with a hologram, you were one of the kind of triangle for them, and they wanted to meet once a month for 6 months. You could decide that when you find your own triangle people to kind of listen to you and ask you questions, you could say, actually, I want to meet twice a year for 5 years. So you can fix your own timelines based on your own lives. um, and I
Yeah.
love that the flexibility of that, because I mean, you talked a bit before about the kind of like the overwhelm, and I think you kind of like called it like the brain fog of these times where there's just so much, and there's so much helplessness as well for many of us looking at everything that is happening either where we live or just everywhere. And we feel that sense of complete overwhelm, like how do we act on the things that matter? And that sense of like we're barely surviving, we're barely staying afloat, we are so tired. But that there's something about, if you can kind of work out the timing that works for you, then having that real quality time that's about clarifying what's important to you, that will be, I think, just immensely flexible to fit into people's lives.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the space of the hologram is an amazing place for negotiation and like just practicing saying what you need and want and stuff. And so like um you can do whatever you want. There's no doing it wrong. I think the only thing that could go wrong is that you wouldn't communicate what you wanted.
Mm.
And like so yeah, I mean, I think it's such an important space to be able to say like as the hologram to say like I would love this kind of very formal situation where you're going to support me in these ways. And like if it's not working, I'm going to say it. Like or if you're asking me questions that don't really work for me, I'm going to say it because the rest of the world trains you to just shut up and take it. Like if you're getting something good, you should just be grateful for it. But I think to be able to sort of negotiate feels
Mm.
really important and it's good practice.
Yes.
Um, and I think that's for everybody involved. So nobody needs to walk through the hologram feeling like, um, I don't know, taken for granted or like it's not working for them. There's it's a situation that's built on the promise that everybody will sort of speak up about what they want and need.
Oh, that in itself is amazing. Yeah, I had a little kind of the hairs on the back of my neck stood up when you said that. Like the only thing that could go wrong is that you don't communicate clearly what you want. I mean, that's pretty radical and so important.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's really funny how I mean, it's been so long of being in community with other people doing this and doing it myself, and I still find it very difficult. Um, but I think it's like it's a practice for that reason. Like you keep doing it because there's a lot to undo and there's a lot of stuff to learn and to make mistakes with. And I think, yeah, like it really is a matter of being able to sort of like stay in communication. And it's just, that's a lot.
Yeah. And we've been thinking a bit in this community about kind of, I suppose, yeah, like social technologies or approaches for dealing with difference, conflict, polarization, just the challenge of like, we've been one of our previous guests was talking a lot about restorative practices and nonviolent communication. And obviously this is so relevant in the world we're in at the moment, especially people living in communities or places where there's huge differences. Even on one street, there'll be such huge kind of um, different fundamental value differences that feel sometimes just completely insurmountable. Um, and so this feels like incredibly helpful in that way as well. That the building that muscle of being able to clearly state what you need. Um, that really does remind me of, yeah, the restorative practice and nonviolent communication approach as well,
Mm,
which
yeah.
feel
Also, like, I think there's might be a part that's also like, if you imagine like if everybody that you knew was really felt like if everyone felt very seen and understood, how different it would be to be in like shared space. And if you would go into new social contexts feeling filled up, like known, like some like three people in the world really know you, like I think it's really different to show up then. And so maybe it takes some of the pressure off of like negotiating with people we don't agree with if like we're not fighting like to be seen and understood, but like we're negotiating with those people about what is actually possible and on the table. Because I do think that like a lot of I don't know if this is kind of like I'm saying this as I'm thinking it, but I think like some of identity politics might be about just many people never being seen and walking around feeling invisible and forgotten and unwanted. And like if those people, which I think is all of us, would be able to walk into spaces and feel like we already belong. We already have our crew. They have names. I see them every once in a while. Like it's very clear. I wonder if like the disagreements and the people in the next neighborhood who believe in carrying guns or whatever, if there's like a way to kind of be able to negotiate without also sort of wanting in a sort of never quite articulated way to also be understood and seen. I don't
Yeah.
know.
That's that really resonates and feels. I feel that in my bones because I've had, I have a little kind of signal group chat with my two very, very close friends. We're a little triangle ourselves. We're not a four, but we are going to start a hologram. And we are, we're in each other's signal chat like all day, every day, and we are just each other's home base. And we've done our own kind of informal version of the hologram without realizing that's what it was. And I think, yeah, I've traveled in the world very differently since I've had that. And I've had that sense of like the deep understanding of people who we all provide that for each other, and the deep listening and the deep acceptance and total love. I mean, it's love really, isn't it? It's like love in action. This kind of attention. It's what we all wanted to receive, not just from parents, but from villages, that we didn't have. It's like the village that we long for, that most of us didn't grow up within because of capitalist consumerist culture and fragmented nuclear families as well. So there's
Mm.
something so primal and deep about that sense of like the little circle around you of acceptance.
Yeah, I wonder if in another society, in another world, like we wouldn't need it. Like if we would be like animals that just coexisted without needing so much support and attention and like reminders that we're okay. Like I think there's something almost about like a horizon where actually like we become creatures that know we belong. Like we get enough attention and like the grandchildren or the great grandchildren actually like don't suffer from this feeling of like never being accepted, seen, wanted, or belonging, you know? I wonder because I think like in our paradigm, it's definitely the case that like we were born not feeling like we deserved anything and not having like structures of support that would like allow us to continue or to repair those feelings and like um yeah, but in the long run I wonder what's possible. I don't know.
And I think there's also something about like finding the people that we really trust as well, because I guess some of the violences that kind of individualistic culture, a competitive culture does, I think, is makes it harder to have those kind of relationships that are really based on collaboration and like the idea is that you're kind of like you're in group, you're all working together. But I think that sense of like competition really infiltrates our culture in a whole school system, education system. There's so much kind of competitiveness and kind of scarcity for power and jobs and all of that stuff. So there's something to me that feels really important about like who your hologram is, like finding people that you really trust and that you can really be in that space of like we're not in any way in competition with each other. And even potentially people that you don't know that well, like you don't have to do this with friends that you're really close to, but finding the people that you're like, okay, I'm ready to do this,
Hmm.
so caring with these people. And you say in the book about, you have a protocol for if it doesn't work and how you can shift. And that is also probably incredibly good practice for rupture and repair and saying if something's not working out and making a change and not being frightened to say.
Yeah. I actually think that you can do it with anybody though. Like I think that that's the important part is that like we've done lots of experiments where people kind of like walk into a cafe or a museum or whatever and like sit down with four strangers or three strangers and do it.
Yeah.
And it always works. And I think that's like, there's definitely like people that can be difficult to be in the same room as. And there's lots of like lessons we've learned about what not to do when in terms of who to invite. Like you don't invite somebody you want to impress. You invite somebody that you want to have ask questions about you. Um, and so there's like a lot of things that we've learned, but I think the project is based on the fact that like pretty much anybody can do it, and over time it would get better, and we can also like teach each other. And that trust is like something you don't actually need a ton of trust to enter the space. Like you need to be able to communicate well about your needs and like your wishes and what you don't want. And then trust can grow. But you don't actually need a ton to start, I think.
That is just the happiest thought. Hearing you say that and just knowing that it just kind of works with anyone. And that really actually kind of rings true. And I think there's something about that idea of when, like, it's the intentionality of who you're working with. And I was thinking, like, bringing it up, like, cautiously because of the how much people are holding around this, but I could also imagine people from the two very extreme opposing sides of the political spectrum in the US, for example. I've often had this feeling about like when you take the hat off, where you take the kind of like that actually the human beings underneath it, like you have a chat to somebody about. I've just had those times in my life where someone who I would have thought I would be like on the other side of, something's happened, they've helped me out, or I've helped them, and you see the humanity underneath. That kind of connection is so beautiful and it's so true. And this just is, I want to hold on to that idea that like beyond the kind of the political, the huge polarization that we have been kind of pushed into and manipulated into it in a way, it like
Hmm.
politically,
Yeah.
that us and theming that we have been pushed towards, that actually underneath all of that, that's not actually really who we are. That actually, if we're in a room with people, whatever color their teeth, like whatever side they're on, that actually if you sit there and you say, I'm going to talk to you about my health. I'm going to talk to you about my relationships. I'm going to talk to you about how I'm feeling right now. And then they do the same, like that we all have that capacity to do that. And that if the intentionality is we're all on the same side, we're all doing this together, then like when we feel that, then it's very easy to love each other and accept each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's such a dream to do it across difficulty. Um, yeah, I can't say that I've had a ton of experience doing that because it's not so easy to set up, but I would love it. Um, and yeah, and I think like I have this kind of faith that if people with too much power use the hologram, like it would it would intervene in a good way. Like I don't think that people who have too much power, like I'm not sure that we can say this about like Trump, but like I think most people with too much power, if given the chance to be sort of seen and to see other people, if they could do that, if they could really do the hologram, I don't think they would want their power in the same way. But of course, those people would never participate in a way that was authentic and stuff. So I think it's an interesting one, but yeah, it would be I feel that like living in Germany with people and their confusion about like Israel and Palestine that grew up in Germany with memory culture, like I see it. I see how much dissonance there is and like how little there's no space to really talk about the like really deep confusion and yeah, and like the history of why people have become to believe what they believe. There's no space to really, really unpack that and to see each other as people. Um,
Mm.
yeah, one day.
Well, I mean, I just want to say such a huge thank you to you, Cassie, because you really have artistically created, dreamt up, and also just the book is so beautifully written. I mean, it is just a piece of art in itself. Um, and oh yeah, can you show us the new book and tell us where to get?
Yeah, so this is a very different kind of book. It's called It's Too Late, and then if you flip it, Do It Anyway. Um, and it is a book about being a cultural worker in the apocalypse. So this is actually really, really aimed at the art world and at people that I think are like what I was as a younger artist who felt a lot of pressure um, to present and keep up in certain ways and to work in ways which were like beautiful and symbolic. And this is like a book that is a little bit of like a challenge. Like, why should we do more art and exhibitions when actually, like, as creative people, we have a lot of other stuff that we can also offer. And so then we use the hologram as a practice, as an example of something that you can just start to do, which will change your life and that we change collectively. And then so like this side of the book is actually like a really great manual with all of our resources in it. So it has a description of like all the steps to the protocol. It has like our kind of like commons license. Like so if you want to take and make the hologram public, like what are our values? Um, it has a glossary and a kind of update to like what has been happening in the organization that is the hologram. So I feel like this is very practical and hands-on and is more than half the book. The other half is a wild sci-fi journey into like what it means to be a cultural worker right now and like what's possible. Um, and it's available from like a small publisher in the US called Thick Press. So just thickpress.com. And yeah, and if anybody would like to just view a PDF or something, I'm happy to share those.
Well, thank you so much. We are really excited about bringing in the hologram kind of methodology into ASA, and we're going to really look forward to having you to do a workshop with us at some point in the future. Not sure when, but we're going to. And yeah, just I hope everybody gets these books and yeah, brings these practices into their communities, their friends, their towns, their worlds. And I can't wait. Maybe we can chat again in a few years as well on for a woodland walk and talk about the changes that it has brought, because I truly believe that this is going to have huge ripple effects, and I can't wait.
Oh,
You'll get to know about them because you'll hear all the stories.
I'll be around.
It would be great to hear from you about the feedback you've been getting over the years as it expands into the world.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a huge pleasure.
Thank you, Cassie, and speak to you soon. Mwah. Thank you.
Yeah.